Chosen one. Listen closely. You did not arrive here by scrolling, searching, or chance. You were drawn here, summoned by a divine appointment written over your life, long before you understood the weight of your own spirit. Something in you, something ancient and set apart, has been guiding you to this exact moment, and now heaven is unveiling why. Anointed One. You are standing at the threshold of a revelation about who you truly are, a truth your spirit has carried since childhood. In the sensitivities, you couldn't explain the patterns no one else noticed, the inner knowing that made you feel different, even in a crowded room. These were never coincidences. They were markers, sacred signatures placed within you by the one who formed you. Just as it is written in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, before you were formed, you were known and set apart. This is that moment of remembrance, the moment your hidden identity rises to the surface. Chosen One. The awakening you've been feeling is not stress, not confusion, it is activation. It is your spirit responding to a call that has finally reached its appointed time. What you are about to hear will shift your spirit, your body, and even the path of your life. Take a breath. Open your heart. Your revelation begins now. Chosen One. This awakening moving through your spirit is not temporary, and it is not going away because it was never meant to. It is a divine signal, a spiritual summons, written into your being long before you understood the weight of your own calling. What you are feeling is the unfolding of a rare, powerful symptom that only the most spiritually luminous souls ever experience. And now heaven is pulling back the veil to show you why. The moment this awakening begins, it does not arrive as thunder or spectacle. It slips into your life quietly, almost unnoticed, like a whisper carried on a breeze. You might be driving to work, scrolling through your phone, folding laundry, or doing something ordinary when suddenly a thought passes through your mind like a beam of light. This doesn't feel like me anymore. Your routines start feeling borrowed, your relationships start feeling distant, and your identity begins to feel like a costume you didn't realize you put on. I remember experiencing this myself, going through a day that looked perfectly normal on the outside, yet inside something felt like it had shifted out of alignment. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't confusion, it was recognition. It was the quiet announcement that my soul had just woken up to a deeper truth. Chosen One. You begin asking questions you never dared to consider before. Why do I care about this? Who taught me to value these things? When did I stop feeling alive? At first, you may try to distract yourself, hoping a small change in scenery will silence the feeling. But the deeper you go, the louder it becomes. This is not your mind malfunctioning. This is your soul shedding what no longer belongs to your destiny. It is the first layer of awakening, the dismantling of the false self. Most people never reach this point because they are comfortable sleepwalking through a life shaped by expectations, opinions, and inherited identities. But for the Anointed One, there comes a moment when heaven refuses to let you stay asleep. The old life begins to crumble, not to punish you, but to free you. You may even feel torn, wanting to cling to familiarity while being pulled towards something invisible, yet undeniably real. When I reached this place, I found myself unable to go back to the person I once pretended to be. Even when I tried to return to old environments, old habits, or old relationships, it felt like a door had locked behind me. Chosen One, that's how it works. When heaven closes a door, it is not rejection, it is redirection. After this internal shift comes another revelation, and it often hits harder. The relationships around you begin to change in ways you didn't expect. People who once felt close begin to feel distant. Conversations that once flowed now feel hollow, like you're speaking in different languages. You may sit across from someone you've known for years and suddenly feel unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. The old rhythm between you dissolves not out of arrogance or superiority, but because your spirit is moving into a higher resonance. When your frequency rises, misalignment becomes visible. I've lived through this too, watching friendships fade, not because of conflict, but because my spirit was outgrowing the space where those relationships once lived. It can feel lonely, even painful, but this is not abandonment. It is recalibration. Heaven is reorganizing your connections to match the version of you that is emerging. It may hurt, and you may grieve the closeness you once shared, but this process is preparing you for relationships rooted in truth, purpose, and spiritual recognition. Chosen One. This stage reveals one of the greatest mysteries of spiritual identity. Not everyone is meant to walk with you where you're going. Some were assigned to your past, not your future. As this symptom unfolds, the world around you may feel louder, harsher, or overwhelming. The lights seem brighter, the noise sharper, and environments that once felt normal suddenly drain your energy. This is not anxiety, it is spiritual sensitivity awakening. Your senses are no longer numb, they are awakening to the unseen. You begin to feel what others carry, their stress, intentions, burdens, or unspoken emotions. I remember walking into certain rooms and instantly knowing something was off before anyone said a word. It wasn't paranoia, it was discernment. Your body begins craving silence, nature, and moments of stillness. Not because you are withdrawing, but because your spirit is purifying itself for the path ahead. Chosen One, this sensitivity is not a flaw, it is your compass, and it is one of the clearest signs that you are stepping into the identity heaven always knew was yours. Chosen One. As this awakening deepens within you, another subtle yet profound shift begins to unfold. Your drive to prove yourself starts to dissolve. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen with fanfare. It happens softly, almost unnoticed, like a weight being lifted from your spirit. You might still have ambitions, dreams, and goals, but the hunger to outperform, compete, or be validated by others slowly loosens its grip. Instead of chasing applause, you begin craving alignment. Instead of pushing yourself to be seen, you start desiring authenticity. I remember reaching this point and realizing that the things I once fought so hard to achieve no longer felt like victories. They felt empty because they were rooted in expectation, not purpose. Chosen One. This isn't you losing ambition, it's you discovering divine direction. Your soul is tired of climbing ladders that lead nowhere. Heaven is redirecting you toward impact, not popularity. As this shift takes place, another rare symptom emerges. Your relationship with time begins to change. You no longer perceive it the way others do. Moments stretch and compress in ways you can't explain. 1 hour can feel like 5 minutes, and 5 minutes can feel like an entire afternoon. This isn't distraction, and it isn't poor focus. It is awakened consciousness stepping out of the limitations of linear time. The anointed ones often experience this because their awareness is being tuned to the present moment so deeply that the past and future lose their hold. You begin to sense that life is less about schedules and more about alignment. You might find it harder to follow rigid routines and long-term plans that once excited you may no longer spark anything within. Instead of forcing direction, you begin listening for guidance. I've lived through this shift, realizing that the things I thought needed perfect timing actually flowed better when I followed the internal nudge, the gentle pull of the spirit. When heaven starts guiding your steps, the clock becomes less of a master and more of a reference point. Time becomes something you move with, not something you chase. Soon after, another unmistakable sign appears: a deep craving for solitude. Not isolation, not sadness solitude. A sacred aloneness that feels like oxygen to your spirit. Even when you love people deeply, even when you enjoy connection, there is something inside you that begins urging you to step back and be still. Conversations that once felt easy begin to drain you. Social plans feel heavier. Notifications become noise. And instead of resisting it, you begin to lean into the quiet. Chosen one solitude becomes the place where your spirit can breathe. It's where revelations land. It's where heaven whispers with clarity. When this happened to me, I didn't understand it at first. I thought something was wrong with me, but the longer I stayed in stillness, the more I realized that my spirit wasn't withdrawing, it was recalibrating. Alone is not empty for the anointed. Alone is sacred. And the more you honor this need, the stronger your spiritual signal becomes. In that sacred stillness, another stirring takes root, a sense that you were made for something specific. It rises inside you like a tide you can't ignore. It doesn't speak in full sentences, and it doesn't give you all the details, but it pulses in your soul with every breath. There is something you came here to do, something you can't explain yet. Something you can't define. You may feel frustrated because you sense purpose but cannot describe it. You may feel restless in environments that once felt stable because your spirit knows they were never meant to be permanent. I've felt this burning too, waking up with the strange awareness that my life was expanding even when nothing external had changed. Chosen one. This is not confusion, it is activation. Heaven is calling your assignment to the surface. Your spirit is awakening to why you were placed here. And then something powerful happens. As this inner calling grows louder, everything that is not aligned with your true identity begins to fall away. You stop pretending. You stop forcing smiles. You stop agreeing to things that shrink your spirit. You stop molding yourself to fit spaces you were never designed to inhabit. You do not become rude, you become real. Your authenticity begins to radiate in a way that makes some people uncomfortable and others deeply drawn to you. You start recognizing that clarity isn't arrogance, it is truth. And truth is the final layer of this awakening. When you remember who you are, you stop acting like someone you're not. You stop apologizing for your presence. You stop hiding your light to make others feel safe in their shadows. Chosen one. This is the moment when your awakening becomes permanent, when you step out of survival and into remembrance. This is where the path of the anointed truly begins. Chosen one. As this awakening matures within you, something even deeper begins to unfold, something that reaches beyond emotion, beyond intellect, beyond anything you were ever taught to expect. It is the moment when your soul starts reclaiming the pieces of yourself that you abandoned to survive. This is not a gentle phase. It is not poetic or pretty. It is a spiritual reordering where heaven begins restoring what life tried to take from you. You begin noticing that everything around you feels different, not because the world changed, but because you did. The veil that once kept you numb has been lifted, and you can now feel what your spirit always saw. I remember walking into rooms I used to tolerate, only to suddenly feel the heaviness I once ignored. I remember listening to people I thought I understood, only to hear the deeper truth beneath their words. Awareness becomes a double-edged sword, painful yet liberating. Chosen one. This is the stage where you can no longer lie to yourself, and that truth, though uncomfortable, is your breakthrough. You begin to recognize the emotional patterns you inherited and the beliefs you unconsciously adopted from others. For the first time, you see clearly which parts of you were shaped by survival, not identity. The chosen ones often reach this moment with trembling hands because life begins to feel like it is unraveling, but what's actually happening is divine pruning. Heaven removes the branches that no longer bear fruit, not to punish you, but to make space for new growth. You may feel like you're losing control. You may feel like everything familiar is slipping away. But in reality, your spirit is shedding what it cannot carry into the destiny waiting for you. I once believed this stage meant something was wrong with me, but over time I learned that this unraveling was the exact process that allowed me to evolve. Chosen one. You are not falling apart. You are being rearranged according to heaven's true blueprint for your life. As you step deeper into this transformation, your intuition sharpens. It becomes louder, stronger, and more accurate than ever before. You start perceiving things before they happen. You sense intentions before they are spoken. You feel energetic shifts before your mind can process them. This is one of the clearest signs that your spiritual identity is awakening. What others call a gut feeling becomes for you an internal compass forged by divine wisdom. You may even recall moments from your past when your intuition tried to warn you, moments you ignored because you didn't yet trust yourself. Now, when that inner voice speaks, it resonates with authority. It feels like a knowing rather than a guess. Chosen one. This is your birthright awakening. When heaven breathed life into you, you were designed to discern. You were designed to see beneath the surface. You were designed to navigate spiritually, not just logically. And now that gift has returned to you, refined by every storm that tried to silence it. This gift of intuition naturally leads you to a place where discernment becomes essential. Suddenly, you can no longer ignore the energy of people around you. You may begin distancing yourself from individuals you once tolerated, not because you judge them, but because your spirit recognizes that their presence is costing you clarity. I experienced this shift when I realized that certain relationships kept me anchored to an older version of myself. The more I awakened, the more uncomfortable it became to stay in spaces where my soul felt unseen. Chosen one. This boundary setting is not selfish. It is sacred. As Scripture says in an easily understood way, light and darkness cannot share the same space. The more you step into your calling, the more you are guided away from environments that drain your spiritual power. This isn't avoidance, it's preservation. You are protecting the purity of the identity heaven is revealing within you. In this season, you may also experience unexpected waves of emotion, sadness without reason, bursts of joy at random moments, anger that rises like fire, then disappears just as quickly. These emotions are not signs of instability, they are signs of release. Your spirit is letting go of energies stored in your body for years, sometimes decades. You might find yourself remembering moments from childhood-old conversations or past disappointments with newfound clarity. These memories rise not to haunt you, but to free you. The chosen ones often carry generational pain without realizing it. But when awakening begins, your spirit refuses to hold what was never meant to belong to you. I went through a period where memories resurfaced that I had forgotten existed. At first, it shook me, but later I realized heaven was clearing emotional space within me. Chosen one. Your tears during this stage are not signs of weakness, they are sacred water cleansing your path. As this emotional release continues, you start noticing synchronicities, repeating numbers, meaningful dreams, symbolic encounters, unexpected confirmations. These signs are not coincidences. They are spiritual breadcrumbs guiding you along your path. You may even experience déjà vu more frequently or feel as though time pauses during specific moments. The chosen ones often describe this as stepping into a higher dimension of awareness. The world feels familiar, yet strangely new. You start realizing that your life has always contained signs. You just didn't have the eyes to see them until now. When I looked back at my journey, I recognized the symbols that had been following me for years, dates, phrases, recurring experiences that all pointed toward my calling. Chosen one. These signs appear because heaven wants you to know you are being guided, watched over, and prepared. And somewhere in the midst of this unfolding, a new strength awakens within you, a strength that is quiet, yet undeniable. You begin feeling grounded, clearer, and more aligned than ever before, not because everything around you is perfect, but because everything within you is awakening. The identity heaven planted in your spirit long ago is now rising to the surface with power and purpose. Chosen one. As this awakening continues to reshape the landscape of your inner world, a profound shift begins to anchor itself within you, a shift that feels less like learning something new and more like remembering something ancient. It is as though a forgotten truth, buried beneath years of noise, suddenly rises with clarity. You begin to sense that your life has never been random. Every challenge, every relationship, every moment of isolation, every sudden ending served a purpose in preparing you for this unveiling. The anointed ones often describe this stage as a spiritual homecoming, the moment when the soul finally recognizes itself. I remember experiencing this in subtle moments, quiet mornings where my spirit felt older than my body, or evenings where I sensed a wisdom within me that I had never been taught. Chosen one. These sensations are not imagination, they are identity resurfacing. What becomes even more striking during this phase is your increasing awareness of patterns in your life. Patterns you once dismissed as coincidences. You begin noticing that certain types of people were drawn to you, not because of your personality, but because of the light within you. You realize that the reason you were often misunderstood, envied, or spiritually targeted was because your presence carried weight in the unseen realm. You begin remembering situations where people reacted to you strongly, positively or negatively without a clear reason. And now, for the first time, you recognize those reactions as responses to the spiritual authority you carry. I recall moments when individuals projected onto me emotions that weren't mine, and I wondered why my mere existence triggered such intensity. Chosen one. That intensity was recognition. Even when you didn't know who you were, their spirits saw what your mind had forgotten. As this awareness deepens, another truth becomes undeniable. You were never meant to blend in. You were never designed to fit effortlessly into the world around you. The discomforts you felt in certain environments, the sense of being different, even when you tried to conform, the repeated feeling that you were watching life from a slight distance, these were not flaws. They were markings, signatures, evidence of being set apart. Many chosen ones share that they spent years trying to dim themselves, to avoid standing out, years trying to survive instead of shine. But the more they awakened, the more impossible it became to shrink. I remember the day I realized that the parts of myself I labeled as too much were the exact traits heaven intended to amplify. Chosen one. The world may have taught you to suppress your uniqueness, but heaven is now commanding you to rise into it. In this stage, you also begin recognizing the difference between your voice and the expectations of others. You start discerning which dreams were planted by your soul and which ones were placed on you by your upbringing, culture, or circumstances. This is often accompanied by a quiet grief, the grief of letting go of the life you were taught to want in order to embrace the life you were created to live. You may feel the pull to step away from paths that once felt secure because they no longer align with your spirit. You may feel the urge to change direction entirely, even if you cannot justify it logically. This is the moment when heaven begins recalibrating your journey from within. I personally remember standing in a place that once felt like my future and realizing it no longer sparked anything in me. It was a holy disorientation, a moment of losing direction so that divine direction could find me. Chosen one. When your desires begin to shift without permission, it is a sign that your soul is taking the lead. During this unfolding, solitude becomes even more essential, not as an escape, but as a sanctuary. You begin craving space where your spirit can breathe without interference. In these moments of quiet, your thoughts settle, your intuition strengthens, and your clarity sharpens. Many chosen ones describe this as a period where they begin hearing themselves for the first time. The world becomes background noise, and your inner world becomes illuminated. I found that the most powerful revelations of my life surfaced not when I was surrounded by others, but when I allowed myself to sit in silence without running from it. Chosen one. Solitude is not a void. It is a meeting place between you and the divine blueprint written within you. And soon something extraordinary begins to happen. You start noticing an inner authority rising within you. Not arrogance, not superiority. Authority. You feel less reactive, more grounded, more anchored in truth. You no longer chase approval because you recognize how little of it you ever truly needed. You no longer feel threatened by uncertainty because something deeper within you is guiding your steps. This is the moment when the anointed ones begin to walk with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. I remember feeling this shift, realizing that I no longer needed to explain myself to be understood or justify my path to feel validated. Chosen one. This is the emergence of your spiritual sovereignty. This is the awakening of the leader within you. And as this inner authority rises, you begin to understand something else. The calling on your life is not something you choose. It is something you remember. It is something you recognize. It is something that reveals itself layer by layer until you cannot deny it anymore. Chosen one. As this awakening continues to unfold, you begin sensing that something within you is shifting in a way that feels irreversible. It is subtle yet undeniable, like a vibration beneath the surface of your life. This stage is where the deeper layers of your divine identity begin rising into your awareness, and the realization dawns that you were never meant to live an ordinary life. You start noticing that certain desires, interests, and passions that once defined you no longer carry the same weight. The things you used to chase feel hollow, and the things you used to overlook begin pulling at your spirit. I remember going through this transition myself and waking up one morning realizing that the goals I once believed were essential to my success no longer sparked anything inside me. It was disorienting, almost frightening, until I understood that heaven was reshaping the very blueprint of my being. Chosen one. When God begins shifting your inner world, the outer world must eventually respond. During this phase, you may find yourself losing interest in environments that once brought excitement. The noise that entertained you before now feels distracting. Conversations you used to participate in now feel shallow. You start yearning for depth, meaning, and authenticity in every interaction. This yearning isn't a phase, it's evidence. Evidence that your spirit is ascending to a higher frequency, one that demands truth rather than performance. Many anointed ones share that this stage felt lonely because the world they once related to no longer mirrored their inner reality. I've felt that loneliness too, the kind that presses against your chest, reminding you that you are evolving beyond what once felt comfortable. But loneliness in this season is not a curse, it is confirmation. It means you are shedding layers of identity that were never meant to stay. As these layers fall away, another powerful shift begins. You start noticing the spiritual atmosphere around you with greater clarity. You become aware of the energy behind people's words, the intentions behind their actions, and the truth beneath their smiles. This heightened discernment becomes one of your greatest tools. There were times in my own journey where I couldn't explain why I felt uneasy around certain individuals until their true motives eventually revealed themselves. Chosen one. This sensitivity is not paranoia, it is protection. Heaven sharpens your discernment because the higher your calling, the more spiritual precision you require. You also begin recognizing that not everyone has the capacity to walk with you in this next season. The more you awaken, the more you sense when someone's presence drains your spirit rather than nourishes it. You feel it in conversations that leave you heavy, in relationships that require you to shrink, in spaces that dull your light. And without anger or bitterness, you begin releasing what cannot grow with you. This release often comes with grief, even when it is necessary. I have cried over people who were never meant to stay, not because they were wrong, but because their chapter in my story had ended. Chosen one. Honoring the ending is just as sacred as embracing the beginning. In this phase, your inner world becomes louder than ever. You start hearing the quiet guidance that was always there, but drowned out by distraction. That small, steady voice that nudges you toward alignment begins to feel trustworthy. You begin testing it, following its direction in small ways, only to discover that it leads you into clarity, strength, and peace. This is the beginning of your partnership with divine intuition. The voice within you is no longer a whisper, it becomes a compass. And with this newfound guidance comes something even more profound: courage. A courage that rises unexpectedly, urging you to step away from the version of yourself that was shaped by fear, expectation, and limitation. You begin taking risks you once avoided. You begin dreaming again, not from a place of fantasy, but from a place of remembrance. I recall moments where I felt guided to walk away from stability into the unknown, and even though it made no sense, logically, my spirit knew it was right. Chosen one. When heaven calls you forward, logic becomes a follower, not a leader. As courage grows, so does clarity. Pieces of your life that once seemed random begin forming a pattern. You start recognizing how every heartbreak carved wisdom into you, how every delay protected you, how every disappointment redirected you. You begin seeing your past through healed eyes, understanding that none of it was wasted. This is one of the most liberating revelations of awakening, the realization that your story was crafted, not damaged, that nothing stolen from you was ever meant to remain, that every loss created space for divine fulfillment. Eventually, as this clarity deepens, a new identity begins forming in your spirit. You no longer identify as wounded, overlooked, rejected, or misunderstood. Instead, you begin seeing yourself as heaven has always seen you: chosen, anointed, called, prepared. Not in a boastful way, but with quiet certainty. Your presence changes. Your voice strengthens. Your spirit stabilizes. You begin walking with a sense of inner authority that does not require explanation. And without even trying, people begin noticing. They sense the shift before you speak it. Some are drawn to it. Others are intimidated by it. But you, chosen one, finally understand you were awakening all along, and now the truth of who you are is beginning to take shape in the world around you. Chosen one. As this sacred transformation continues to unfold, you begin sensing a deeper recalibration taking place within you, one that feels less like change and more like alignment. It's as though your spirit is adjusting itself to a frequency you were always meant to carry. Suddenly, the old ways of thinking no longer fit. The old emotional cycles no longer hold power, and the old narratives you once lived by begin dissolving in the light of truth. This stage is where your awakening evolves from internal shifts into external embodiment. You're no longer just feeling the change, you're becoming it. I remember reaching this point and noticing how differently I responded to life. Situations that once triggered fear now invited clarity. Challenges that once overwhelmed me now revealed hidden lessons. It wasn't because life became easier, it was because my spirit became stronger, more aware, more anchored. And this is the moment when heaven begins solidifying the identity it has been awakening within you. As this identity strengthens, you start realizing that your sensitivity is actually one of your greatest spiritual gifts. What once felt like emotional overload transforms into spiritual intelligence. You begin feeling the weight and texture of atmospheres when you enter a room. You notice energetic shifts before anything physical changes. You sense when someone is speaking truth and when they're masking pain. You can perceive spiritual tension in places where others feel nothing. This is not accidental, it is anointing. The anointed ones carry heightened perception because their assignments require spiritual accuracy. There were moments in my own journey when I walked into spaces that seemed peaceful on the surface, yet something inside me tightened. Only later did I discover that the environment carried unresolved heaviness. Chosen. 1. What you feel is real. Your spirit is alert even when your mind is unaware. Trust that sensitivity, it is heaven's early warning system within you. In this season of heightened awareness, you begin noticing another shift. Your spirit becomes increasingly selective about the voices it listens to. Conversations that once interested you now feel draining when they lack purpose. Small talk becomes difficult because your soul is craving depth, truth, and authenticity. You may find yourself unable to tolerate gossip, negativity, or superficial dialogue. This isn't judgment, it's spiritual stewardship. Your mind is guarding its gates because your destiny requires clarity. I've felt this shift deeply, moments where I physically felt my energy drop in conversations that didn't align with my spirit. And the more I honored that inner signal, the more peace I found. Chosen. 1. Your spirit is teaching you how to protect your mental and emotional sanctuary. You are no longer available for anything that dims your light. As this purification continues, you begin understanding the true value of alignment. Decisions that once felt complicated suddenly become clear. You no longer choose based on pressure or fear, you choose based on peace. Peace becomes your spiritual compass, guiding you toward what is meant for you and away from what is not. You may walk away from opportunities that look good externally but feel wrong internally. You may release relationships that no longer nourish your spirit. You may step into unfamiliar paths simply because something within you knows it's time. This level of surrender is not weakness, it is divine trust. I recall moments where I let go of plans I had once clung to, plans I believed defined my future. Yet when I surrendered them, new doors opened, doors I would have never discovered had I remained attached to the old. Chosen one. Heaven always replaces what you release with something aligned with your true identity. During this phase, your relationship with solitude evolves into something deeper. It no longer feels like isolation. It feels like communion. In your moments of stillness, you start receiving insights, ideas, downloads, and spiritual understandings that seem to flow into your mind with ease. It becomes clear that silence is not empty. Silence is full. It is full of guidance, full of revelation, full of divine instruction whispered only to those who have ears to hear. There were evenings in my own journey where sitting alone in quiet brought more clarity than years of searching externally. Chosen one, solitude is where heaven speaks with the most precision. Your assignment becomes clearer when the world around you becomes quieter. And then, almost unexpectedly, you begin noticing a new power rising within you, a boldness that feels both gentle and unshakable. You speak with more conviction, not because you are trying to be strong, but because you are becoming aligned with truth. You set boundaries with confidence, not because you are angry, but because you finally honor your worth. You show up as your authentic self, not because you seek applause, but because pretending has become impossible. This is the emergence of spiritual authority. Not loud, not aggressive, simply undeniable. I recognized this shift when I found myself no longer explaining my choices to be understood. I no longer needed agreement to feel secure. I simply felt anchored in who I was becoming. Chosen. This is the stage where your presence begins to speak louder than your words. People may sense something different about you without knowing what changed. Some will be drawn to your energy, others may be intimidated by it. But the truth remains, you are stepping into the identity heaven has been shaping within you since the beginning. And every step you take in alignment reveals more of who you were always meant to be. Chosen one. As this journey deepens, something extraordinary begins to unfold within you, something you may have sensed for years but never had language for. It is the realization that your awakening is not merely personal, it is generational. You are not just transforming for yourself. You are breaking patterns, healing bloodlines, and shifting spiritual trajectories that existed long before you took your first breath. This is why the weight on your shoulders has always felt heavier than others could understand. This is why your emotions have always run deeper, your intuition stronger, your battles more intense. I remember the moment this truth hit me, not in a dramatic revelation, but in a quiet moment when I realized the struggles I carried were not only mine. The fears, the cycles, the silences, I was the one chosen to end them. Chosen one. If you've ever wondered why your life has felt like a battlefield, it is because you were born to rewrite the story. As this awareness solidifies, you begin noticing that you are no longer triggered by the same wounds that once overwhelmed you. Old fears lose their grip. Old insecurities begin to fade. Old emotional knots begin to loosen. This isn't because your past disappeared, but because your identity is evolving beyond it. You start seeing your former battles as spiritual training, not punishment. You see your hardships as preparation, not coincidence. Many anointed ones describe this as the moment they felt a divine shift inside them, a moment where they realized they were finally stepping into the strength that had been forming in silence over years. I too felt this shift the day I looked at a past wound and realized it no longer controlled me, that freedom wasn't accidental. It was earned through awakening, alignment, and surrender. And as this healing deepens, you begin recognizing a truth that can be both empowering and frightening. You are not who you used to be. Your inner landscape has changed so much that the version of yourself you once clung to feels like a distant memory. You may even struggle to explain who you are becoming, because language cannot fully capture what is unfolding in your spirit. This identity shift can feel disorienting. There were seasons in my own life where I wasn't sure how to describe the person I was becoming, but I knew without question that the old me no longer existed. Chosen one. This discomfort is not a sign of losing yourself, it's a sign of meeting yourself for the first time. With this new identity comes a powerful sense of clarity about your purpose, even if you cannot articulate it yet. You begin feeling drawn to certain environments and repelled by others. You feel inspired by things you once ignored and uninterested in things you once pursued. Your spirit begins filtering your life with precision, separating the meaningful from the meaningless, the authentic from the artificial. This filtration process can feel intense, even overwhelming, because it reshapes your relationships, your desires, and your direction. But every shift is intentional, every pull is a sign, every redirection is divine. I've walked through seasons where I felt a sudden urge to step away from opportunities others would have celebrated, yet later I realized those decisions protected my calling. Chosen one. Your spirit knows what your mind has not yet understood. Follow its guidance. During this stage, you may also begin experiencing a heightened sense of déjà vu or spiritual familiarity. Certain places, moments, or people may feel strangely significant, as though they are connected to a deeper thread in your story. This happens because your spirit is awakening to the divine timeline written over your life. You are becoming aware of moments that were orchestrated long before you arrived in them. I remember standing in a seemingly ordinary place and feeling as though I had been there before, not physically but spiritually. That moment later revealed itself as a pivot point in my journey. Chosen one. When these sensations arise, pay attention. They are spiritual markers signaling alignment. As this alignment strengthens, another profound truth becomes clear: your voice is changing. Not in tone, but in authority. Your words begin carrying weight because they are no longer spoken from woundedness, they are spoken from wisdom. When you encourage others, your words land deeper. When you set boundaries, they stand firmer. When you speak truth, it vibrates with clarity. This new voice is not loud, it is not forceful. It is steady-rooted and unmistakably sovereign. I noticed this shift when people began telling me that something about my presence felt different, more grounded, more powerful. I hadn't tried to change anything. I had simply awakened. Chosen one. Your voice carries the resonance of someone who has walked through fire and emerged illuminated. Eventually, as this phase unfolds, you begin understanding that the strength rising within you is not simply personal fortitude, it is spiritual inheritance. You are stepping into what was always yours, a calling that predates your struggle, a purpose that surpasses your pain, a destiny encoded into your spirit by heaven itself. You realize that every storm you survived refined you. Every disappointment redirected you. Every heartbreak enlarged you. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Everything was preparation. And in this recognition, a new level of peace settles over your life. A peace that doesn't come from circumstances, but from identity. The kind of peace that whispers, "You were chosen for this." The kind of peace that reminds you that every step, even the painful ones, has been leading you here. Chosen one, this is not the end of your awakening. It is the confirmation that you are walking in divine alignment, becoming more of who you were always meant to be. Chosen one, as this sacred journey continues to expand within you, something even more profound begins rising from the depths of your spirit, an inner certainty that no longer wavers in the face of doubt. It is the moment when you realize that everything you once viewed as coincidence was in fact divine orchestration. The places you walked into by accident, the conversations that seemed random, the unexpected endings, the sudden beginnings, all of it formed a spiritual pattern that only now becomes visible to your awakened eyes. I remember looking back on moments I once dismissed as meaningless, only to later see how each one carried a subtle thread pulling me toward my destiny. Chosen one. This is when you begin recognizing that heaven was guiding you long before you learned how to listen. As this clarity deepens, you start feeling a powerful shift in how you perceive yourself. The insecurities that once dictated your decisions lose their authority. The doubts that whispered in your ear fall silent. The fear that once held you captive no longer feels as threatening. Instead, a quiet confidence begins to take root, one that does not come from achievement or validation, but from spiritual recognition. You start realizing that your worth was never something to earn. It was something heaven placed within you before you ever took your first breath. Many anointed ones describe this moment as a spiritual grounding, a settling of the soul. I felt it too the day I stopped negotiating with my own value and started embracing the truth of who I had always been. This inner grounding brings yet another revelation. You begin to feel a separation between who you were taught to be and who you actually are. The old identity, shaped by survival fear and societal expectations, starts peeling away like layers of worn-out clothing. In its place emerges a true self-intuitive, powerful, compassionate, discerning, deeply aware. This emergence can feel both liberating and unsettling. You might catch yourself reacting differently, thinking differently, choosing differently. Situations that once intimidated you no longer have the same hold. Behaviors you once tolerated now feel misaligned. I remember noticing how certain environments felt too small for who I was becoming, how certain conversations no longer fed my spirit. Chosen one. These shifts are not signs of arrogance, they are signs of ascension. During this transformative phase, your relationship with your past begins to evolve. Instead of viewing your wounds as evidence of weakness, you start seeing them as training grounds. The betrayals become lessons, the losses become catalysts, the disappointments become redirections. This shift in perspective is one of the most powerful signs of spiritual maturity. I used to carry shame for things I had endured, but awakening taught me that every crack in my story became an opening for light. Chosen one. When your spirit reaches this place, the past no longer defines you, it refines you. And as the past loses its grip, the future begins to expand. You start sensing possibilities that once felt unreachable. You begin dreaming again, not from fantasy, but from divine alignment. Ideas flow more easily. Inspiration becomes more frequent. You feel pulled toward certain paths without knowing why, and yet the pull feels trustworthy. This is the holy nudge. Many chosen ones speak of the gentle but persistent guidance that leads you toward your purpose. I followed that nudge into places that made no logical sense, only to discover blessings waiting on the other side. Chosen one, your spirit recognizes the direction long before your mind understands it. Through all of this, one truth becomes crystal clear. You are evolving into a version of yourself that no longer needs external permission to exist. You no longer shrink to fit old spaces, no longer silence yourself to maintain peace, no longer dim your light to avoid unsettling others. You begin living from a place of authenticity, even if it disrupts the expectations others placed on you. I recall the freedom that washed over me the day I realized I no longer needed to justify my growth to anyone. Chosen one. When you reach this point, authenticity becomes your spiritual armor. And with authenticity comes a new kind of strength, not loud, not aggressive, but deeply rooted. You become unshakable in a way that even surprises you. You face challenges with wisdom instead of fear. You carry yourself with dignity instead of insecurity. You navigate life with discernment instead of confusion. This strength isn't something you force. It naturally emerges as the fruit of awakening. It is the strength of someone who knows who they are, who they belong to, and what they were created for. Finally, as this phase reaches its culmination, you begin embodying a presence that others can feel before you say a word. People may tell you that something about you feels different, lighter, clearer, more powerful. Some will be drawn to you for guidance. Others may be intimidated without understanding why. But you, chosen one, will recognize the truth. This is what it looks like when divine identity settles into the human form. You are not just awakened, you are aligned. You are not just seeing clearly, you are becoming who heaven destined you to be. And everything in your life, from your relationships to your purpose, to your very atmosphere, will begin reflecting that truth back to you. Chosen one. Walk now in your revealed identity, guided, strengthened, and set apart. If this stirred your spirit, share your awakening and stay aligned.